I'm not exactly sure how to start off. I'm not even sure what I'm doing here. The way this worked is NBER called me up and said, we have this conference on market design. We want you to come. And I said, Mark Miller is a very common name. Pretty sure you got the wrong person. No, that was the first part. And the second part was, well, no, it's you. And I said, but I don't understand anything you people do. And they said, we still want you to come. And then I said, I don't want to come. And now, so, I'm going to do what I think I'm supposed to do here, which I think is to give you a policy kind of angle on things, but it will be very different. I understood about 30% of what Ben said, things like Medicare Part B or C and D, that kind of thing. I understood that. But then he would say all these other things. I didn't understand any of that. But let me try and tell you who I am, where I fit in the environment, and then some observations on this kind of work, I think, and how it's played out in the policy environment. So I'll try and do that. Hopefully you get something constructive out of this. If you don't, I want you to be clear to blame the NBER people, because in the end, I really didn't want to be here. So just, oh, no, I'm not going to do that. I want, sorry. Okay. All right. So in terms of a career, like why you might want to listen to me, I'm not a PhD economist. I have managed some PhD economist operations. I ran the CBO's research operation on their social science research, which is all PhD economists. I worked at the Urban Institute for years and did kind of, quantitative policy-oriented research. But very much policy kind of oriented. Found myself more and more kind of talking to the Hill about ideas, and then eventually kind of left the Urban Institute, and I went to places like the Office of Management and Budget, the Congressional Budget Office, something that's called the Medicare Payment Advisory Commission. And the way to think about that is just kind of Congress's think tank on Medicare, kind of data analysis, policy ideas, and then recommendations to the Congress. I have been involved in like major pieces of legislation, the Balanced Budget Act years ago, just in case anybody in the room has forgotten. There was actually surplus momentarily after that, not so much anymore. Also at the, the birth of the Part D benefit, the most recent reform 2010 to the managed care Part C, Medicare managed care plans, surprise billing more recently, those kinds of things. And the thread that I want to get in your mind, the kind of person I'm in, has been about trying to identify unnecessary spending, and particularly in the Medicare program. So my people are like the OMB people, the CBO, the Committee for Responsible Budget, those kinds of people. That would be my tribe. I don't know your tribe, okay, with all respect. So the next thing I guess I would show you is what I'm doing now. And I think the value of putting this across to you is also give you a sense of how I think about healthcare and the issue that the way I'm pursuing these issues, but also when I get down to the bottom tranche here of these boxes, this is where my portfolios are. And if there are ideas that you think apply here, you might want to talk to me. Or you might not after this talk. I would completely understand. So Arnold Ventures, so I was at MedPAC for 15 years. About 5 years ago, I went to Arnold Ventures. Arnold Ventures is a philanthropy, notwithstanding the name, which doesn't sound like that. It is a philanthropy. What we do is hemorrhage money. That's all we do. I fund research. I develop policy. I work with some people outside of the organization to develop policy, but I do a lot of that, with my own crew. And then we engage in a lot of technical assistance to the Hill, but we also work at both the federal and the state level. And so, kind of develop evidence, develop a policy, try and influence the policy process. So we're looking for policy impacts for the most part, but also there's a couple of market disruption plays that we've been involved in. If anybody wants to talk about that, we can do that on a question. So that's most of that slide. And then down at the bottom, I just want you to understand the way I've kind of organized. And I will say one other thing. I don't think philanthropies think about the notion of saving money much. A lot of philanthropies are about coverage, quality, puppies, happy stuff. And of course, we're kind of like, we're spending too much. There are areas in which we are clearly spending too much. If you want to do these other things, pay for expensive drugs, maybe you don't want to do a lot of this nonsense, that kind of thing. Okay, so the way I've organized my portfolio, and on the left two boxes, I think of this as kind of price oriented, and the right two boxes is utilization oriented. Be clear if there's overlap, so don't get too hung up on that division. But, you know, I am of the firm belief that the biggest problem in the commercial sector right now is not utilization, where we look a lot like other countries. It's price. It's what we pay per unit, whether it's drugs, hospitals, physicians, you name it, we pay a lot for it. I think, well, I'll get into that. The second box is drugs, and we think of the entire perspective, the patenting process, the FDA approval process, the middle market, the PBMs, coverage, payment, you know, everything from beginning to end. Third, provider payment incentives. This is things like accountable care organizations, global budgets, putting primary care in more of a capitated situation, a PM basis instead of a service by service type thing. And then Medicare sustainability. I spent a lot of years on Medicare, so I have a portfolio where I'm just trying to help the Congress think through a whole range of issues on Medicare. Every one you mentioned, a whole range of issues on Medicare, and the whole notion is just to try and have it survive for the younger people in the audience here today. And then finally, the last block is there's 12 million people who are eligible for both Medicare and Medicaid. These two programs work in conflict with one another. These are often the sickest, poorest, least educated, you know, people in our population. So we're trying to think about bringing a greater degree of integration to that setting. And I really wish I had some great econometric and economist type terms to describe all of that, but I don't have any. But that's my agenda. And if you guys have any interest or things that you can bring to this, I'd be happy to listen to them. But really, sort of how can I contribute to this particular conference? And let me say a couple things here. One thing that I think goes on as a matter of almost religion is that a lot of people, and Ben, I got close to making this point, is this assumption that when you go to a market-based result or a market-based system, like you don't need the government. The government can like just kind of walk away from the situation. That's a pretty naive point of view. And I hope that it doesn't kind of land in this room as a surprise, but I have to tell you out there, you know, when you're dealing with people in the commercial sector, government is stupid, you know, they mess everything up. You do this, then they can be gone. And I just want to be clear, there is still tremendous amounts of work to make these types of things operate. I mean, there's just notice and comment. The government can't do things in an arbitrary and capricious way. You have to educate beneficiaries. You have to educate providers. You have to run the auction, say, in a durable medical equipment circumstance. And we're talking about multiple markets, multiple products. Fraud is always present. There's always this sense of like these kinds of things can remove fraud. And I genuinely believe that if done consciously and carefully. But think about the managed care situation. About 50% of the Medicare population is now in private plans. And of course, one of the arguments throughout the development of that and the growth in that was, oh, well, the managed care plans will, stamp out provider fraud. And that may be what happened, but the insurers are engaged in fraud now and are abusing the system through upcoding and some of their gaming on the quality scores that they get. So there is, to my mind, still a high level of government effort to kind of manage the process. I don't think it disappears. But I do think there are benefits. I do think, like, for example, you can have a dampening effect on fraud, and you could reach a better market clearing price, for lack of a better word. But it's not magic. It has to be built and kind of built consciously. Let me catch up with my notes here. Okay. The other thing I want people to know, and again, I don't think people in this room would be this naive, but the industries in question, they are not interested in competition, just to be clear. So yeah, so you will be imposing your ideas on them. They will not be welcome. And I think it is still a very useful, I cannot tell you how many rooms I've been in with the managed care industry, with the lab industry, with durable medical equipment, you name it, and behind closed doors, which is, do not do this. We have no interest in this. And what I think is really important about it, and you may not like this particular point, is this can often be used as a leverage point. So many years ago, I had through MedPAC, I had a drive going on the Hill on lab, bidding for lab services, basically. And inexplicably, it caught and it had momentum, enough momentum that the industry was genuinely threatened that this was going to go through. And the industry offered, and I've forgotten the number, it's either 7 points or 9 points off of their payment rate not to do the competition. And that's the deal the Congress ended up taking. Now, to my point of view, I'm not entirely stupid. I understand if somebody gives you 7 points, there was 15 that were really there. I get it. But I got 7 points, and I would kind of chalk that up to a win for the taxpayer. But of course, there was probably more. I'm sure there was more to get. So the other thing I would say is like, be aware there will be fierce, opposition to these types of things. But what's really great about trying to pursue these kinds of models is it is very hard to argue against competition. And particularly when you claim you're an entrepreneur and you're private and government is stupid, that when somebody like me comes along and goes, well, what about let's go to competitive bidding? You have to be pretty fancy about how you oppose it. And generally you attack the details and you attack the process. And that has happened in other circumstances. Okay, the industry will oppose. Okay, the next thing, how am I doing on time? Yeah, we're good. God, this will be over shortly. So if you're having a bad time, we're getting close. Okay, it's almost over. Okay, because I'm having a bad time. I don't know about you guys. Okay, here's the next thing I think that I would, respectfully ask of you. Be careful how your voice is used. And, the industry sometimes can co-opt people. And this is the example I'm thinking of. So during the durable medical equipment debate, there's actually, 2 points I want to make here. And let me reverse it. I'm sorry. So the first one is think about, and Ben touched on this, and I appreciate it. When you design your perfect model, think of, and I don't know how to express this to you, a more relaxed version, or what you could step back from and get a lot of what you're trying to do, but maybe not all of it because of, and I'm picking up on this term and I'm going to use it now, because of the political economy, which I picked up today, and I'm going to talk about myself that way in the future. I'm all about the political economy. For example, I was brokering some conversations when that was going on between the administration, the industry, and the scorers, because the scorers were kind of thinking about how did the model work from a truly economic point of view, and if you relaxed it, how much would you lose, that kind of thing. And I wasn't driving things. I was mostly sort of viewed as a neutral person where people could come together and talk, and I could kind of ask questions to get them to talk. And one of the points of conflict was that the economists were kind of arguing you had to do this pure market clearing thing. And I'm going to say a thing that is about your work, so I apologize for what's about to happen. Bid 1, you get 1/3 of the market. Bid 2, you get 2/3 of the market. Bid 3, you get all of the market. That's your clearing point, and you're done. But of course, CMS by law has to deliver wheelchairs in Cleveland. And if one of those people walks away, they by law have to fill that gap. And so CMS, the agency that was administering, was saying, I need some ability to go to a higher price to bring the next person in, because I can't have no service in that area. And of course, other people were saying it's a binding bid. you could have a bond. And even that was a huge political fight, because if you put a bond on, then little people get kicked out of the situation, which I'm going to come to in just a second. And so there was this real tension of like perfect versus, but what do I do if suddenly my third provider walks on me, that kind of thing. And of course, you can chase them through the courts, but meanwhile, somebody doesn't have their wheelchair. So you have that. And then what happened is the industry got a bunch of economists to sign a letter that says there's only one way to do this, and you have to do it this way. And it almost killed the proposal. And I thought it was very interesting, because I was pretty sure everybody on the letter wanted it to happen. And it was just, I felt, and maybe there was something else behind the scenes that I didn't understand, but I felt like in some ways they were being used by the industry to kill it. As it turned out, it didn't work. It did go through. I think the last thing I'm going to say, and we're in the last 5 minutes, so I won't take all the time, I'll get off. But the other thing I want to really track to is something that Ben said at the end. As you think about this, and again, the way you think about it, I don't fully understand. So this comment may not land exactly right. So for example, when Ben was talking about how you think about cost sharing in the Part C or the Part D, area, is it, really about innovation, or is it about selection, those kinds of things? We deal with those issues all the time. But the larger issue in the background, when I think about the work that you're trying to do, is this. There is extreme levels of concentration in the healthcare market, maybe throughout the economy, but I don't know anything about that. But insurer consolidation, provider consolidation, private equities buying up physician services. How in a situation like that do you enter and have like robust competition? And the second question is, does that competition drive you to higher degrees of concentration? And again, I'm kind of back to the DME as an example, although you could pick other examples. If you're worried about fraud or somebody dropping out, you run an intense front end. What's your experience? What's your financial status? Can you put up a bond? That type of thing. You're already disqualifying people from the process. And like, do you end up with big concentrated actors? And like in managed care, I think the top 3, plans are something like 60, 70% of enrollment headed to more of it. And so I would worry a lot about that if I were your kinds of market design people. And with that, I want to apologize for anything that I said, and in fact, everything I said, and I'll turn it over.